Bună ziua!
Bună ziua!
Vreau și în legătură cu poliția.
Da. Ce s-a întâmplat?
Doamnă,
Cum vă numiți?
sunt domnișoara, am 15 ani și ieri am fost de către un domn.
În ce localitate te afli?
În Caracal. M-a dus în Caracal, dar nu știu unde exact.
Păi dă-mi un punct de reper unde te afli în Caracal. Cum crezi că te găsim? Alo?
Veniți repede, vă rog.
Alexandra Mucișanu was born on September 15, 2003, in the commune of Dobrosloveni in Olt County, Romania. She was only 15 years old and attended high school in Caracal. Her case shocked the entire country when the details of what she went through came to light, along with a police response that fell far short. Alexandra left home on July 24, 2019, heading to the city of Caracal, which is less than 6.2 miles from her home in the commune of Dobrosloveni. She was a student at the Mihai Viteazul Theoretical High School in that city. That day, during summer break, she went there for extra classes. It was something like private lessons or a prep course related to her studies. After finishing in the late afternoon, she went to the roadside intending to hitchhike back home. Alexandra used to do this, and she wasn't the only one. Other teenagers in the region did the same. Since it is a rural area where practically everyone knows each other, hitchhiking is quite common among residents. However, on that day, Alexandra had the misfortune of getting into the wrong person's car. That person was Gheorghe Dinka, who at the time was 65 years old and worked as a mechanic. Because he was elderly and the area was considered very safe, Alexandra didn't imagine for a second that she was in serious danger. She felt trust and believed she was in the presence of a responsible adult who just wanted to help her. As soon as Alexandra got into Gheorghe's car, he accelerated. Midway through the trip, he stopped the car in an isolated area and overpowered her. He blindfolded her, took all her belongings, including her backpack and cell phone, and took her to his house in Caracal. That same day, Alexandra found herself trapped in a desperate situation, as Gheorghe strictly controlled her every move. She didn't know exactly where she was and only believed she was still somewhere in the Caracal area. But the place she was in was a large, isolated house. After that, Gheorghe left the house and Alexandra was left alone. But since she was locked in a room, she couldn't escape. The next day, Gheorghe left again and Alexandra was once more alone in the house, locked in a completely sealed room. She decided to inspect the entire room to see what she could find that might help her escape. But it was becoming increasingly difficult. During her search, she managed to find a cell phone. Immediately, she called the authorities asking for help.
Bună ziua!
Bună ziua!
Vreau și în legătură cu poliția.
Da. Ce s-a întâmplat?
Doamnă,
Cum vă numiți?
sunt domnișoara, am 15 ani și ieri am fost de către un domn.
Cum te cheamă?
Mucișanu Alexandra, vă rog, veniți repede, nu știu unde sunt.
Cum adică nu știi unde ești? În ce localitate te afli?
În Caracal. M-a dus în Caracal, dar nu știu unde exact.
Păi dă-mi un punct de reper unde te afli în Caracal. Cum crezi că te găsim? Alo? Da, rămâi la telefon, dar încearcă să dai un punct de reper ca să știm exact ce...
Veniți repede, vă rog.
It was around 11:05 a.m. on July 25, 2019. However, the operator on the other end of the line did not know how to help Alexandra. The woman asked Alexandra who she was, where she was, and what had happened. Alexandra answered each question in desperation, repeatedly begging for help. However, since she had been blindfolded during the trip, Alexandra did not know her exact location. The only thing she was certain about was that she was somewhere in the Caracal area, which covers a large region. One detail Alexandra managed to remember and tell the operator was that Gheorghe's car was gray. She could not recall any other description of the vehicle, such as its make, model, or license plate. She also mentioned a business card found in the room with the name Lucian Gabriel Popescu, but stated she did not know if that was the name of the man who attacked her. According to sources, the local authorities who handled Alexandra's call did not have the necessary technology to quickly locate her through tracking. This caused delays. In addition to the first call, Alexandra called the authorities 3 more times asking for help. In one of the calls, the teenager asked a police officer to stay on the line with her because she was very scared. The officer replied that he could not stay on the line because there were other calls to attend to. Another response she received was to stay there, as the police would arrive in 2 or 3 minutes. This meant that authorities were giving the young girl false hope, without even knowing where she was. In one of the calls, an operator reportedly became irritated with Alexandra's desperation and told her to be quiet. saying they were already on the way. This response was obviously completely inappropriate. Usually people who answer police calls are trained to calm callers down and gather valuable information, but in this case it seems the operator was far from being a competent professional. It is important to remember that Alexandra was enduring an unimaginable ordeal, facing extreme circumstances that left her psychologically devastated. Alexandra kept repeating everything she had gone through and said she was very afraid, knowing the man who did this to her could return at any moment. All of these calls were recorded and later made public, increasing public outrage even further. In her final call, the operator told her to stay calm because the police would arrive in 2 or 3 minutes. This was not true, as the police only arrived nearly 20 hours later when it was already too late. The police identified the house where Alexandra was being held at around 2 a.m. on July 26th. However, together with prosecutors, they decided to wait another 4 hours before entering. They surrounded the entire area but did not enter the residence. They did this because they intended to obtain a warrant before entering the house, but this process took time. However, under Romanian law, when a person is in imminent danger, a warrant is not required for authorities to enter a location. When they finally entered the house, they found Gheorghe inside, and he repeatedly claimed he knew nothing about Alexandra. Later, after being pressured by the police, Gheorghe confessed that he was responsible for Alexandra's disappearance and also for another girl named Luiza Malencu. Luiza was 18 years old and disappeared on April 14, 2019, after hitchhiking with Gheorghe. This was his modus operandi. He would target young girls, pretending to be kind, and then take them against their will, keeping them for a period of time in his house while committing unimaginable acts. During a search of Gheorghe's entire house, police found charred human remains inside a barrel. Some jewelry and women's items were also found in the house. The burned remains found in the barrel could belong either to Alexandra or to Luiza, the other 18-year-old girl who had disappeared in April. At the time, Luiza's family believed she had voluntarily left with a boyfriend, and her disappearance was not treated with urgency. The family only became truly alarmed over time as Luiza gave no further signs of life and made no contact. The process of identifying the remains found in the barrel was extremely difficult due to their condition. Among the remains, a metal plate was found, initially believed to be an orthopedic or dental implant. However, neither Alexandra nor Luiza had such a plate according to their families. Because of this, authorities theorized there could be a third victim. However, after analysis, it was discovered the metal piece was not medical or dental, but simply a fragment that may have come from the barrel or an unknown belonging of one of the victims. At the time, this information caused major speculation due to the possibility of a third victim. Many began to question who this third victim could be, especially since other girls had disappeared in the region years earlier. Authorities were only able to identify the remains through a few teeth that were recovered. They extracted DNA from these teeth and compared it with the DNA of Alexandra's and Luiza's families. It was then confirmed that the remains found in the barrel belonged to Alexandra. Luiza's remains were not found in the house. Police questioned Gheorghe about this, and he agreed to lead them to a forest where he claimed to have left Luiza's remains. In that forest, at the location indicated by Gheorghe, officers found a bag containing human remains. These remains were sent for analysis, but they were heavily burned at extremely high temperatures. This destroyed the genetic material needed for proper identification. Luiza's identification was mainly based on Gheorghe's confession and anthropological analysis, which confirmed the remains belonged to a girl between 15 and 18 years old. Therefore, there was no 100% DNA confirmation. The case caused massive outrage in Romania. When the public became aware of the authorities' poor response, thousands of protesters took to the streets of Bucharest, the country's capital. These protests lasted several days and became one of the largest public outrage movements in recent Romanian history, and as a result, multiple officials were dismissed. Those dismissed included the head of the National Police, the head of the Olt Police, the prefect of Olt County, and several other officers, including the commander of the Caracal Police. The protests also helped halt controversial reforms to the penal code that were weakening the fight against crime and corruption. The Prime Minister proposed a national referendum to impose harsher penalties for serious crimes. The measures included life imprisonment for those convicted, but the proposal did not move forward. This was because the Prime Minister did not have the authority to call such a referendum, as only the President could do so alongside Parliament. Additionally, the proposal was seen as populist and an attempt to divert attention from the authorities' failure. During the investigation, authorities discovered that Gheorghe Dinka had not acted alone in the crime against Luiza Malencu. His neighbor, a 46-year-old man named Ștefan Risipițeanu, actively participated in the crime. According to authorities, he was also a direct participant in the extreme mistreatment of the girl alongside Gheorghe. Ștefan was arrested a few months after Gheorghe, once police gathered enough evidence proving his involvement. Because of this discovery, authorities began investigating the possibility that Gheorghe was part of a larger network, a network of men who targeted young women to harm them in the worst possible ways. A theory emerged that Gheorghe would drive around areas where he knew girls commonly hitchhiked. His intention was to target these young women and later offer them to other men in exchange for money. After that, Gheorghe would be responsible for killing them and disposing of their bodies. According to the investigation, Gheorghe had experience in this. He knew how to burn a body in a way that reduced it almost entirely to ashes. This made identifying the victims extremely difficult. At this point, authorities began to believe that Gheorghe had more victims beyond Alexandra and Luisa. DNA traces from 3 different women were found in his house, none belonging to the known victims. Additionally, more than 40 gene buttons were recovered from the same barrel used to burn Alexandra's body. This suggested he had burned many clothes in that barrel, clothes that could belong to other possible victims. Another element supporting this theory was that families reported receiving disturbing phone calls. Some men called the families describing in detail what had happened to the girls. The details were extremely disturbing. It was as if these men knew exactly what had happened and were taking pleasure in recounting it. Police investigated the possibility of more individuals being involved beyond Gheorghe and Ștefan. However, they found no concrete evidence proving the participation of others. When questioned, both men refused to cooperate and claimed they knew nothing. The trial of Gheorghe Dincă and his accomplice, Ștefan Risipițeanu, was long and filled with controversy. It took nearly 4 years to reach a conclusion. Everything began on January 15, 2020, when prosecutors formally charged them in the Old Court. Gheorghe faced a long list of serious charges. Ștefan was charged with participating in the crime against Luisa Mălencu. The trial officially began in October 2020 at the Old Court. Due to the severity of the case and public outrage, all hearings were held behind closed doors. The proceedings lasted nearly 2 years. The final hearing took place on June 16, 2022. On September 23, 2022, the first verdict was announced. The court sentenced Gheorghe Dincă to 30 years in prison, the maximum possible for someone his age. Ștefan Risipițeanu received only 7 years in prison. Both the prosecution and the defense appealed the decision. The case was taken to the Court of Appeal of Craiova. After several months of review, the final ruling was issued on May 30, 2023. Gheorghe's 30-year sentence was upheld for all crimes committed against Alexandra and Luisa. Ștefan's sentence was increased to 12 years in prison. Since then, both have been serving their sentences at the Craiova Penitentiary. Gheorghe, now over 70 years old, attempted in 2025 to request a suspension of his sentence for health reasons. The request was denied. There is also a new investigation against him for destruction of evidence, but this does not change his main conviction. To this day, these are the only 2 men convicted in the case. No one else has been charged or brought to trial. This is despite all the suspicions of a larger network and the possibility of additional victims.